Good morning, and thank you all, especially to our very distinguished witnesses, for being here this morning, and as well as to all of those who care so deeply about human rights and are here in the audience. The freedom of religion is the most fundamental and the most elemental of all human rights. It is clearly the first freedom from which all the others flow. It allows each citizen the precious right to follow their conscience peacefully and without fear. It protects the critical part of who we are as human beings to seek, to speak, and to act out our fundamental beliefs. When this freedom is protected, the very well-being of society is enhanced. No government should deny or suppress this essential claim to conscience. The reality is, and the tragic reality is, governments and terrorist groups do restrict the freedom of religion, sometimes in the most brutal and public ways. The freedom of religion today, as it has been for a number of years, is under siege in many places of the world, including and especially in China, which is, of course, the subject of today's hearing. Because religious freedom conditions are deteriorating globally, I recently introduced H.R. 1150, the Frank Wolf International Religious Freedom Act. The bill gives the administration tools to better address religious freedom violations around the world. It is why I'm also fighting to reauthorize the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, or USCIRF, which is a bipartisan and independent advisory group that has done incisive work over the years. USCIRF gives Congress vital recommendations about religious freedom conditions globally and recommendations for actions. I'd like to now turn to Ms. Lin for her testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the Congressional Executive Commission on China for convening this event. My name is Anastasia Lin. I am a Canadian actress. I will be representing Canada at the 2015 Miss World competition in Sanya, China. At least that is my hope. Recent events leave me worried for my family who are still in China. I campaigned for the title Miss World Canada on a human rights platform. I wanted to speak for those in China who are beaten, burned, electrocuted for holding their beliefs. People in prison who eat rotten food with blister fingers because they dare have conviction. These are not criminals. These are people who believe in truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. When I was crowned Miss World Canada, my father was very proud of me. But within days, his tone changed. He told me to stop my advocacy or he would sever contact with me. I understand he was visited by the Chinese security agents and forced to say these things to me. I've taken on roles in film and television shows that depict human rights abuses in China. And to prepare, I speak with those who have suffered, including Falun Gong practitioners. In The Bleeding Edge, a film to be released this winter, I played one such woman. She is imprisoned and tortured. In one scene, her family is brought before her, made to kneel and beg her to give up her belief. This is the regime's policy of guilt by association. And this is why my father was threatened by the security forces. Never mind that I am a Canadian citizen, upholding Canadian values on the other side of the world. It's a shock to realize that the man who made you feel safe is in danger. I had to choose between silence and my hope for a better China. And then I remembered, silence helps no one. Silence feeds terror. Practitioners of Falun Gong who have been marginalized, defamed, and vilified in China since 1999 are noble people. Despite the constant threat of arbitrary torture, psychiatric abuse, or death, they are steadfast in their principles. They have always sought peaceful means to resist the persecution and generate awareness. In China today, our traditional values are buried under the moral scars of endless political campaign. Material wealth and the pursuit of self-interest are foremost in people's mind. The courage of Falun Gong practitioners and other dissidents and human rights lawyers are exceptions that give me hope to China's future. And yet, it's these people that suffer the most. People with stories of courage and tragedy like the father of my fellow Canadian, Paul Lee. The elder, Mr. Li, is 60 years old and in Chengdu, China, once a highly respected county magistrate. He is now beginning his second 8-year prison sentence. He was a rarity in China, a high official that did not use his position to gain wealth or personal advantage, and instead he followed Falun Gong's teaching of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance, and sought to be fair in his dealings. Mr. Li spent his first 8 years in prison for writing essays criticizing the Communist Party's crime, and they tortured him and tried to get him to renounce his belief and embrace atheism, and they made him blind in one eye. He did not give up. After being released, he exposed cases of torture and abuse, and that is why he was again arrested and sentenced to another 8 years this April. This is a story of incredible courage, almost completely ignored by the world's media. And there are millions of such stories. Thousands continue to be sentenced to prison every year, often after show trials. Lawyers who represent Falun Gong practitioners, including those lawyers targeted in the most recent crackdown, have faced disbarment, beating, and imprisonment. The current crackdown on lawyers targets these individuals and come as some 80,000 criminal complaints are filed against the former party leader Jiang Zemin by Falun Gong practitioners. The persecution of Falun Gong is widespread and brutal. In 1998, the Chinese Communist government estimated there were 70 million practitioners of Falun Gong in China. And since the persecution began in 1999, millions have been imprisoned, tortured, and sexually assaulted. Estimates of the murdered range widely because information is scarce, and exposing the persecution, it's punished severely. While we have the names and stories of the some 3,800 practitioners who have been killed in the persecution, multiple independent investigators estimate that tens of thousands have been killed so their vital organs could be harvested and sold for organ transplantation, a lucrative business in China. This is a gruesome and unspeakable crime that has created profit for incentives for those brutal persecutors. The victims didn't do anything wrong. They are people of faith and morality. They are people that any country would be fortunate to have. I would think these are the people of integrity that China so desperately needs nowadays. Mr. Chairman, I hope that together we can gain Chinese people a voice. The hope for a better future lays in the people there gaining the freedom to believe what they want and talk to whoever they want to talk to about whatever they want to talk about. I hope this can happen soon. For myself, this would give me back a father, but for many others, it would save their lives. Thank you very much.
And Ms. Lin, I wanted to ask you, you've documented, this has happened to you as well, how the Chinese government often uses China-based family members of Chinese rights activists as leverage to get them to stop their work. Can you describe a little bit about, I mean, you've written about it before, but how, is that an ongoing practice, and how many people have you met that are affected by it, the idea that they use your relatives back in China as leverage against you to prevent you or hopefully to convince you? Because I think it's amazing, and it'll be shocking to a lot of Americans to know there are people living in this country, perhaps American citizens, who are being extorted and or blackmailed through the safety or security of their own relatives back in China.
I would say that this is a common experience of many Chinese overseas, including Chinese Canadians, Chinese Americans. It's almost like a consensus or like a common sense that the Chinese consulate would send people to watch over to Chinese, overseas Chinese. So religious freedom and human rights doesn't really just affect people that are living in China. They affect every Chinese who still have loved ones there. I don't know how it feels like to be tortured by prison guard, but now I know the deep fear that probably felt by many Chinese people, that their convictions might be paid by their loved ones. But if we keep silence, there's no end to this kind of compromise. Chinese people overseas needs to stand up and speak about this issue. Yes, we might be afraid, but courage is not always the absence of fear. To be courageous, I think I learned from these Falun Gong practitioners that to be courageous is to know that something else is much more important than fear. To be able to live according to your conscience, for them, it outweighs the fear of death. So, and that is why I'm going back to China. I hope my presence in that country would help those who are facing this unspeakable horror that we just mentioned today, to help to preserve their hope a little longer. Thank you. Thank you, and please help to expose the organ harvesting.
There's so many things to cover, but I thank you. I apologize. I'm running back. Thank you.
Thank you, Co-Chair Senator Rubio.
I would like to talk about some of my colleagues' experience. These are very courageous people that I work with on independent film and television projects that expose human rights abuse there in China. NTD TV president Shao Jiuwang, his brother was harassed in China because he practiced Falun Gong and also speak about the abuse that are happening. A TV producer, a film producer actually, I worked with last summer, Liang Li. He just made a film about the organ harvesting that's happening in China, and his family member has been constantly threatened by the security force. These are people that are working in the media, help to bring light to this kind of abuse. I think if every Chinese can speak up, and if the government can protect these citizens and speak up and let the government, the Chinese government, know that when they do such things, they will have a reputational cost, then perhaps they will respect our borders a bit more. Thank you.
If you want to make any final comments, or Mr. Pincher, if you would want to conclude on anything, thank you for your speaking truth to power with risks to yourselves and your loved ones when you do it.
Yes, one final remark, Mr. Chairman. There are 50 Falun Gong practitioners who has been recently denied refugee status in South Korea and are ready to be deported back to China to face those inhumane violations. I admire your commitment to human rights, but not everybody, not every government is like that. And I think we now face a choice. Every one of us who are outside and inside China, we can choose to be silent and conform to this kind of violation, or we can use our liberty to advocate for those whose liberty has been deprived. Yeah, thank you very much.
Any concluding comments? Thank you so much. You are true heroes.